Episode 1 of Lupin Part 2 begins on the morning of December 11th. Gadira receives a message linking him to the same train Asane and his family are on. He eventually catches up with Asane and points to the parking lot. Raoul is gone and Asane implores Claire not to get the police involved. Hotwiring a car, Asane takes off with Gadira along for the ride. Meanwhile, Raoul is bundled into the trunk of a car as Pellegrini's hitman, Leonard, makes his way to Normandy. After phoning Pellegrini and informing him what's going on, the boss is not happy and demands he sort his mess out. Well, that mess is about to get a whole lot more rowdy as Lupin and Gadira spy Leonard in his gray car and quickly make haste to chase them down. The game is afoot. Despite managing to narrowly avoid being hit by a train, Lupin and Gadira lose Leonard and desperately try to pick up the scent again. Asane soon receives a text from Raoul, who claims he's managed to take the phone away from Leonard. Asane tests that theory though by replying with details about Lupin's daughter, which of course is a big ploy to oust Leonard. In an old abandoned house, Leonard loads up his shotgun and prepares for Asane's arrival. Raoul meanwhile sits tied up to a chair with nowhere to go. Asane finally rings, with Leonard picking up. He threatens the hitman, warning him against hurting Raoul, as everything looks set for a big showdown. During flashbacks we cut back to Claire and Asane's childhood, where a racist shop owner refuses to allow Asane to buy a violin. He's desperate to impress Claire though and eventually breaks in after school and takes one, being discreet and managing to evade capture. Back in the present, Asane levels with Gadira and admits that he knows he's a cop. In doing so, he manages to tie Gadira to his car and even take his ID too. With the police en route, Asane has an hour at most to grab Raoul and get out. Tension mounts though as Asane sneaks into the house and engages in a game of cat and mouse with Leonard. The two wrestle, with gunshots cracking the air sporadically. Eventually though Lupin bests the hitman and throws him out the window. Raoul, however, is gone. He's actually in Leonard's trunk and with the hitman still alive, he pours gasoline over the car and ignites it. A haunting but well-shot set of scenes then interweave together. The violin owner arrives in the past and notices Claire playing the instrument at her recital. She immediately drops the strings as she notices police arrive. Now she understands that Asane lied and the violin is indeed stolen. The other scene is far more harrowing and shocking. The car explodes as Asane receives an antagonizing message from Leonard. Next time, check the car. As the vehicle explodes and envelopes in flames, Belkacem arrives and forces Asane down to the ground as he screams in grief-stricken pain. Episode 2 of Lupin Part 2 begins right off the back of that shocking cliffhanger last time. Firemen arrive at the scene and open up the trunk of the car. It turns out it was empty, with nothing inside. That's just what Asane needs, as he dupes Belkacem and takes off in a car. Just before he does, he leaves a parting gift in the form of a flat tire for the other officers. We then cut back to the previous night to see the events that transpired with Raoul. Gadira managed to break free from his binds and saved Raoul from the trunk of the car. Unfortunately, they weren't alone, with Leonard in hot pursuit firing wildly as they took off. Meanwhile, Pellegrini's press conference is cut short by a surprise visitor downstairs. It's Claire. Pellegrini speaks to Dumont and organizes a coup to take in Asane. This includes ringing Asane and trying to set a trap. Only, Asane is too smart for this and realizes that Dumont is not being wholly truthful. Well, Asane heads online, after returning home of course, and notices that Pellegrini is hosting a special fundraising gala that night with a number of different people attending. Realizing this could be just the opportunity he needs, Asane starts to sift through his various disguises for the evening's event. Gadira is not so smart though, and he willingly hands over Raoul to the commissioner. Not long after though, he receives a letter with "Thank you Ganimard" written and an accompanying phone. Asane's disguise? Hired help in the kitchen. However, security are obviously expecting him, and it doesn't take long before Asane is spotted. He immediately switches gear, though, and makes it out the front door. As he contemplates what to do next, Dumont leads Raoul out, bundling him into a car en route to safety. This episode's flashbacks jump back to 1995 as we see Asane at school and in trouble following the violin incident. With the shop owner looking to press charges and Asane's future hanging by a thread, he impersonates the owner and calls the principal, telling him to drop the charges. This, as it turns out, lends itself nicely into the present. Using Asane's expertise, he managed to dupe Dumont into willingly letting Raoul go, on instructions from Pellegrini, that was actually Asane all along. In fact, Asane is one actually driving the car Raoul was bundled into. With Raoul and Asane reunited, they drive away. As they do, Asane admits the truth about what happened 25 years ago with his father being framed. Now we jump back 24 hours. Claire rides the train back and realizes Pellegrini is involved in taking Raoul. However, she's unsure how to proceed. Unaware of what's happened with Raoul the previous night, she confronts Pellegrini and tries to buy him off with jewels. Instead, though, he simply tells her he wants Asane. Only, given she's made a deal with the devil, the realization hits home that her distrust in Asane has come back to bite her. Even worse, as she lifts the intercom to let Asane and Raoul in, numerous hitmen stand waiting for the Episode 3 of Lupin Part 2 begins with Asane hurrying out the building as Pellegrini's goons follow in hot pursuit. While they're gone, Claire makes Raoul promise not to see his father anymore, given he's dangerous. Only, unbeknownst to her, he's actually up in the rafters listening to all of this take place. With a plan set and Gadira given instructions to arrive on his own on Monday, Asane finds Juliet in a restaurant. Heading inside, he warns that things are going too far. However, for now he agrees to have dinner with her. According to Juliet, she's settled down, but Asane encourages her to leave without paying the bill. After all, old habits die hard. It's a short-lived return to what they had before though, especially when Juliet tells him they're not 20 anymore and need to move on. With her successful job and not so successful outcomes with men, the flashbacks to 1995 this time around serve to show the bond Juliet and Asane have, going back to moments out in the street together. To show how serious he is, back in the present, Asane steals a lucrative painting from the Orsay Museum and leaves it on her desk. There's a note, of course, telling her sometimes you can't turn back time. However, all of this is Asane's roundabout way of redemption, trying to win her over and claiming he made the wrong choice in the past. In order to prove his worth and show where his loyalties really lie, Juliet gives Asane a new task. She's been spying on Claire for a while and wants the bracelet Mark has bought her. In essence, she wants him to steal the bracelet from his ex to give to her in order to prove his loyalty. He does it too, handing it over and telling Juliet he wants a fresh start. She agrees to his terms, but Asane tells her to talk to her mother first. After all, she knows everything about the framing and how his father was set up. With these moving parts set into motion, Asane brings back the painting and returns Claire's bracelet. It turns out Asane is playing the long game here, and that much is especially true when we cut back a week earlier to learn more. Benjamin is the one who set up the table under the name of Velmont and convinced Juliet to get there. Asane set all of this into motion, acting as a crook and staging the news too. All of this lead Juliet into being the one to entrap her own father without even realizing. With Ganimard sipping his coffee in a quaint shop outside, Anne Pellegrini arrives ready to talk. She's going to reveal everything about Hubert and blow the lid off all the secrets this family have been keeping. And just like that, Hubert is arrested and shown a warrant to search his place. As he's taken away in handcuffs, Juliet waits by the Seine River for Asane. As the camera pans out, Asane ignores Benjamin's advice and heads down to meet her. Episode 4 of Lupin Part 2 begins with Asane stopping a thief from taking off with a suitcase. As he returns it, he calls the man Lucas, which certainly confuses him. Meanwhile, Pellegrini faces the police but feigns ignorance, claiming he doesn't know anything. He reveals Asane's real name, though upon seeing his picture, but for Leonard's he's far more sketchy. However, the minister rings and demands the officers let Pellegrini go on account of a lack of evidence. Instead, the police turn their attention back to Asane. With Pellegrini's release, Juliet starts to get cold feet and contemplates canceling her concert. Asane convinces her otherwise though. Now freed, Hubert turns his attention from Asane to Benjamin Farrell instead. Given how close he is to Asane, he tasks Leonard with keeping tabs on him. In doing so, he deduces this will lead him right to Asane. Well, Leonard eventually catches up to Asane, complete with a silencer attached to his gun. Only, he's blindsided by Pascal, who chokes him out and leaves the hitman for dead. In fact, all of this is done as a way of framing Asane for murder. As Pascal leaves, he phones Belkacem, who falls straight into the trap and rushes to the scene with the other officers. Although Asane manages to get away, he inadvertently becomes the most wanted man in Paris. Following the Queen's necklace, his picture is blown up online, while his apartment is investigated. Next up is Benjamin, whom Asane communicates with and phones, encouraging him to evade the killer, who happens to be right next to him. After losing him on the bus, the pair then get ready to disappear. The police ramp up their investigation with Dumont and Belkacem on the hunt. They manage to track down a warehouse the pair are staying in. Only, when they get there they find the place empty, and a tunnel leading down into the catacombs. The same catacombs, it turns out, Asane and Benjamin managed to obtain a map for back in 1995. However, he leaves a comment on the news specifically for Gadira, which he manages to interpret as an anagram of the Jewish lamp. The same Jewish lamp, in fact, that he earlier picked up at the apartment. Gadira heads straight into the evidence locker and grabs it. Upon closer inspection, Gadira finds a USB holding all the incriminating evidence against Dumont, including the CCTV footage from him being interrogated last season. While Gadira goes on the hunt, Asane and Benjamin manage to escape through a tunnel, linking back up to the surface, while leaving the police stumbling about in the catacombs. Benjamin hands over the old map to the lady who gave it them back in 1995, complete with what looks like a diamond. Asane and Benjamin eventually reflect on their journey as they ready themselves for their final plan. Episode 5 of Lupin Part 2 begins with Dumont preparing security ready for the big theater event that evening. They know Asane is on the way and Pellegrini believes it's only a matter of time before he shows to try and exact his revenge. We then cut back 3 weeks prior to the concert. Asane flies his drone inside Pellegrini's office and uses footage hooked up to Benjamin's laptop to find a name, Lucas Lacroix. Lucas happens to be working at the bank and in charge of Pellegrini's account. He keeps all of these details inside a briefcase which includes passwords, usernames and the like. Remember the scene from the beginning of the last episode? Well, Benjamin and Asane both work together to retrieve what they need from the briefcase. Transferring the details over, Asane hands it back to Lucas just as we saw before. Only this time we know Asane has recovered crucial intel. The right-hand man by Pellegrini's side is also planted too, under the alias of Kerbit, while working for Asane. When Lucas receives a tip-off about Kerbit, Hest quick to pass that on to Hubert. This gives their spy a foot in the door, which subsequently allows for the attention to shift across to the concert. The weeks pass and the big night arrives. Asane is smuggled in through one of the large trunks. At the same time, Gadira shows Belkacem the videos regarding Dumont he uncovered in the Jewish lamp. With the footprints on Leonard's neck a different size to Diop's, they turn their attention back to the past to see what they may have missed. Specifically, they find out that Dumont was in charge of Babaker's case and Leonard was in the same cell as him. Given Gadira was getting close back then, it makes sense that he was taken off the case and Dumont did his best to cover things up. All of this leads nicely to the concert, as Asane, Benjamin, and Calvert all work together ready for their final heist. Juliet takes to the stage, of course, ready to perform, as the camera pans across to a poster for Arsène Lupin. That's certainly a nice touch. Pellegrini has the foundation set up to his offshore account, and as the donations come rolling in, Calvert keeps an eye on the money. Pellegrini does too, but Asane sneaks up behind Hubert with a knife. With guards all over the place, Hubert admits the truth about hiring Leonard and going after Raoul. He also confirms Pascal as Leonard's killer and confesses that Babaker was hired simply to act as a scapegoat in collateral damage. He wanted to accuse him of stealing the necklace while bagging the insurance money for himself. He then hired Leonard to kill Asane's father in prison. Asane eventually decides against killing Hubert and takes off, evading security while Pellegrini breathes a sigh of relief. A really well-shot segment then ensues, as Asane does his best to evade security up several different floors. Pascal messages Dumont to let him know Asane is in the building, who in turn leaves partway through the performance to call in reinforcements. Asane and Pascal eventually fight, with the former coming out victorious and besting the hitman. Gadira and the officers show, though, and immediately arrest Dumont. Asane takes to the stage and reveals the truth in front of everyone about what Hubert has done. As the police look set to apprehend Asane, the lights suddenly turn off and our protagonist scarpers off the stage. In the chaos, Asane manages to slip away and makes it into the server room, where a bag lies in wait. Another disguise, and this time Asane tells all the officers that Asane is up on the roof. With all the officers heading upstairs, Asane sends on the audio confession from Hubert earlier in the episode to Gadira, which can be used against him. Asane heads down to the dock and manages to get away from police before they can realize what's happened. When they do eventually catch on, it's too late, and our gentleman burglar darts away, managing to flamboyantly pilot a boat away. Meanwhile, Claire and Raoul suddenly hear a beeping sound in the apartment and find something under the bed. A message reads Raoul's bridge, which is referencing the bridge that she and Asane decided to name their son on. Raoul realizes this is a sign and takes off. As they do, Asane finds them and tells them both it's all over now. However, he's going to leave, but promises to be back soon. With Asane still a wanted man, Pellegrini and Dumont are taken away by police, but this doesn't stop the chase for Asane. As the season draws to a close, Asane takes off on foot, while the police. The ending to Lupin feels quite conclusive, and in a way reminiscent of the way The Dark Knight concludes, with the authorities after a man that needs to be labeled a criminal. Of course, Asane stealing the necklace from the Louvre still makes him a lucrative target, and the ending hints that we could see more of the gentleman thief in upcoming seasons. However, these 5 chapters have been paced well, with the second half injecting much more urgency into the story compared to the opening 5 chapters, which helped to establish Asane Diop's character and his struggles. Seeing both Dumont and Pellegrini taken away at the end is certainly a satisfying moment, and overall this has been a really solid crime drama. It's also one of the bigger surprises to arrive this year. Overall, Lupin bows out with a satisfying conclusion to this chapter, weaving a consistent thread of good storytelling and strong character development for Asane into one compelling 10-episode series. When it released earlier this year, Lupin was one of the bigger surprises to come from Netflix. Inspired by the adventures of Arsène Lupin, this smartly written French thriller combined a simple revenge tale with some ingenious heists. The 5th episode ended on an almighty cliffhanger and an intriguing change in the way Netflix released these shows. The decision to split Lupin's season into 2 parts is an ingenious idea, and one that looks like it could become Netflix's new formula going forward. Too often a great show is dropped on the platform only to fade into obscurity after releasing 10 episodes in one hit. Stranger Things Season 3 being the more popular example of that. Well, Lupin is not going to follow suit, and judging by this effort, there's plenty more left in the tank for our gentleman thief. This second part wastes absolutely no time picking up where it left off from before. Asane is on the hunt for his son Raoul, who's been kidnapped by the hitman hired by Hubert Pellegrini. A race against time ensues, as Asane does his best to try and find his son, while teaming up with budding officer Gadira. What ensues from here is a dramatic and tense season that follows Asane as he pushes to stop Hubert Pellegrini once and for all. All of this builds up to a satisfying conclusion at the end, while leaving the door open for a possible follow-up. It's the perfect heist in a way, swooping in and managing to whisk you away for 5 enthralling chapters. Once again, the acting all round is excellent, and that whimsical musical score returns to give the show a distinct espionage flavor. It also echoes wisps of James Bond within the motif too, which helps to give Lupin a level of prestige and excitement. Much like before, a few of the episodes add more context to the story with relevant flashbacks to 1995, shedding more light on the complicated relationships Asane has between Benjamin and Juliette Pellegrini. These merge nicely with the present-day shenanigans of Asane, with satisfying reveals at the end of each episode. Speaking of which, those aha moments from the first part, where the veil is lifted to reveal the true nature of events, returns here too in an excellent way. One episode plays the long game with a certain character used as a pawn to set things into motion. Another sees Asane adopt his usual outfits and infiltrate an array of different areas, undo different officials. These moments heighten the drama and tension, which is only accentuated when the police intensify their hunt for him. It helps too that the first episode is absolutely breathless. It's the perfect way to welcome Lupin back, and the episode ends with one absolutely shocking cliffhanger too. No spoilers here, of course, but it's something that will have you scrambling to punch that next episode button as quickly as possible. Overall, though, Lupin's second part is better than the first, injecting more urgency into the plot and managing to close everything out beautifully with a satisfying conclusion. There's no big Netflix cliffhanger here. Lupin is a tightly written, highly enjoyable crime thriller